So welcome everyone to Street Smart Product Manager Live. I'm your host, Shardul. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about what actually bottlenecks AI adoption inside organizations. Turns out it's not so much the technology, it's human readiness. So we're going to talk more about that and what product leaders need to do to make AI work at work. So to help us, we're joined by a very special guest and my friend, Teague Hopkins, who I will introduce shortly. Let's dive into today's topic. I'm going to frame this up and then introduce Teague, and we're going to get into a pretty deep, heavy discussion about this. So AI. AI tools, as we know, I'm sure we all know, they're moving and improving at a pace that, frankly, most of us have never experienced before. New models, new capabilities, new promises, almost weekly, but inside organizations, we know that change doesn't work like that. No matter even if it's pushed or dictated by upper management, right? We know that for real change to take place inside organizations, it means changes across processes, workflows, incentives, even maybe performance reviews, right? And the bigger the organization, of course, the more this scales up. Those things typically change annually, sometimes quarterly, maybe, but not at the speed of AI. AI is changing weekly, sometimes it feels like daily. So why does this matter? It matters because how can you impact customers with AI if your own organization isn't adopting it? It's like, Teague and I were talking about this before the show. It's like trying to sell someone an ink pen when you've never even held one in the first place, right? So this creates a growing gap. While the AI capability keeps accelerating exponentially, uh, organizational readiness can't keep up. And since we're all product people, I'm going to be candid. Guess who usually gets stuck owning that gap? Product management. Why? Because we're the ones who are asked to deliver on the outcomes, in this case, the AI outcomes, but we don't own the incentives, the org design, the governance, the culture, the incentives, any of that stuff. So we end up accountable for results we don't fully control. And that's what we mean by, or at least what I mean by this AI bottleneck. It's not really a tooling or a model problem. It becomes a human and organizational problem. And Teague has been deep in this work, not just embedding AI, for the sake of demos, but enabling organizations to actually use it. And he's got a pretty strong point of view, which is that AI enablement is the product work right now. We'll talk a lot about that. And unless organizations become fluent in AI themselves, they can't credibly deliver AI value to end customers. So today, with his help, we're going to unpack what that really means in practice. So I'm delighted to introduce Teague to all of you. Teague and I go back, gosh, I don't know, maybe it's 20 years at this point. You know, we,
Must be at this point, yeah.
yeah, I think, if my memory is failing me, but I think we originally met through various lean startup and product events in the DC
Yeah.
Metro and Northern Virginia area. And when I met Teague, I felt like I'd found my intellectual spiritual brother. We were like-minded. We were like-minded on so many things, but he also challenged my thinking in really good ways, and that's what I really love about him. Plus, he's a super nice guy. So Teague has spent over 20 years helping mission-driven organizations generate more than $250 million in new revenue while building products that make people's lives safer and better. His experience spans innovation and product leadership roles at organizations like AOL, Deloitte, Capital One, and State Farm. At Capital One, Teague co-founded the Product College and Associate Product Manager program, developing over 1,000 PMs, 1,000, and institutionalizing modern product practices. Today, he leads AI-enabled product strategy at Quanata. Did I say that right? Quanata?
hmm
Great. At Quanata, which is State Farm's innovation lab, focusing on systems that translate AI capability into real-world impact. Teague's known for combining rigorous product discipline with deep care for teams and for treating AI adoption as a human and organizational challenge, not just a technical one. And that's the key. As long as I've known Teague, he always brings a human perspective to technology. He and I have talked about technological trends since the dawn of the internet, I think. And one of the unique things and lovable things that I find about Teague is that he always brings that human perspective. We love to get deep into the technology. We're all technologists. It's super cool. That's great. But he never forgets about people. He never forgets about the human element. And so he regularly speaks on AI, product strategy, and innovation at industry conferences and universities. He's been previously seen at Oxford's Said Business School and Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. He does this because he's passionate about developing the next generation of product leaders through teaching and mentoring. Yet another thing I love about the guy. So Teague, welcome, my friend. I'm so delighted to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here, and what a generous introduction. Thank you.
So let me stop the share because I think this is going to be more of a conversation. Let me start here. This could be a place to start because I think this is a big subject.
Yeah,
And hopefully folks will start chiming as you and I kind of get warmed up and dive into it. When you and I talk, you impassionately told me how AI enablement is now the product work right now, right? And that simply embedding AI into products can be actually a trap, right? So
yeah,
can you explain what exactly do you mean by that, and why have you observed so many companies getting it, so many organizations getting it done, getting it backward?
yeah. So the most common failure pattern that I see is companies putting AI into their product for the sake of adding AI to their product, right? And so they're looking for what can it do? What can we add in so that we can call our product AI enabled when it's not really adding any value for the customer, right? It's more about a marketing pitch or a fundraising pitch than it is actually about solving customer problems. And I think that the causes for that are twofold, right? One is this, a lot of organizations are feeling executive pressure to do AI without a lot of practical support in what that looks like. And jumping directly to building AI things for our customers is sort of skipping over the learning stage of figuring out what AI is actually good at, which is, an ongoing journey as the things that it's good at change week by week. Um, but we talked about this at one point, the your analogy about trying to sell a pen without ever using it. I think that's where a lot of companies get tripped up, is they're trying to put AI into their product when they're not even using AI for their work. And until you start getting hands on with it, it's really hard to envision how it's going to work for customers in a way that actually adds value, because it's different from previous technologies that we've integrated, right? I mean, for starters, it's stochastic, right? That you can have the exact same inputs and get different outputs, and until you
Right.
sort of understand that intuitively, it's really hard to design a product for customers that accepts that as a necessary component of the application.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I remember you and I were talking about there was some organization you were working with, and they did some survey on AI adoption within the organization, and it was not bad, but there were a couple of meaningful gaps in terms of where AI was not being used in the organization. Can you talk a little bit? You don't have to share names and all, but can you just
Sure.
talk
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the common trend that I see across pretty much every organization that I talk to is that the executive leadership team is often the last group to adopt AI fully. Um, and there are some exceptions, right? But it is often the people who are farthest from the actual, the people who are giving the mandate who are the farthest from the actual hands-on work with the AI tools. And that's tricky, right? Because it's very hard to manage something that you don't understand. I think that the organizations that are doing it right have found their super users, their early adopters of AI, and are
Right.
going to them for advice, right? Because nobody has more than, and actually I should define terms here. When we talk about AI here, we're mostly talking about generative AI, right? Traditional AI has been around for decades. There's a lot of, plenty of people have long experience in machine learning and things like that. But for generative AI, nobody has more than maybe 3 years of experience with it. So it's actually a great opportunity for folks earlier in their career to become an expert in something that they're, they are, they're not going to have a manager who knows that much more about it than they do, right?
Yeah.
And the best organizations are the ones that are highlighting the people who understand it, the tools that are using the tools day in and day out, and giving them a platform to teach the rest of the organization, right? Instead of
Yeah.
just a top-down mandate of you must use this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So to your point, executives will, for whatever, various different reasons, right? And we can certainly dive into that. Executives say, hey, we need to do AI, right?
Yeah.
There's board pressure, there's investor pressure, there's earnings pressure. There's a variety of reasons, right?
There's
Um,
FOMO.
there's FOMO, yeah, absolutely. Competitive pressures. The engineering and product teams now are given these marching orders. They dive in, right? So everybody on the R&D side, product management, design, engineering, everybody, even the QA person, they're all diving in. They're adopting, they're diving into Claude Code and Lovable, and they're trying to learn all these AI tools. They're trying to learn what the heck is generative AI, and they're trying to, understand LLMs, and they get deep. They figure out a way to embed AI into the existing product, or maybe create something new and cool. But now it's got to be commercialized. You got to get the salespeople to sell the thing, or you got to get the customer success people to be able to
Support it. Yeah.
support it appropriately, or you got to get support to, if it's actually adopted by the customer, you've got to get support to be able to support that, or even marketing to be able to position it and message it intelligently in the organization, which then creates a problem because if they are not familiar with what it is that they're selling or supporting, then and that's not something that, in product management we can easily control. So first of all, is this something you're seeing? And what have you seen? Or like, what are ways to be able to bridge that gap?
Yeah. The democratization challenge, right?
Yeah.
Getting beyond sort of developer and PM focused tooling to really drive AI literacy across the entire organization. And I think that's, you know, that's the core of the organizational development problem is if you just give people the tools and wait for them to pick it up, some people will pick it up and run with it and other people won't, and those people get left behind. And that's really challenging because as you said, right, AI is it's not a one-off, check the box, okay, we did AI, right? This is a transformation for a lot of companies in the way that they're doing business, in the way that they're doing work, in the way that their products work sometimes eventually. And that sort of buy and deploy mentality doesn't doesn't solve the last mile problem, right? You need to have a plan for bringing everybody along, for getting everybody exposure to the tools, comfort with the tools, literacy and capability, right? It doesn't really work to have the tools segmented off in a small part of the organization and just say, well, that's good enough, right? Um, Not least of which is because there are a lot of places outside of product and engineering where AI can be incredibly valuable, right?
Mhm.
It's a very useful a tool for enabling people to do their work faster and in different ways. And that's one of the things that you lose out on if you don't have sort of a plan for how do we level up the entire organization, make sure nobody gets left behind.
Yeah. On the point of democratization, which is a big word, which that's hard for me to say, democratization. So when people were registering for this episode, we asked them, what's been your biggest challenge adopting AI in your organization? We got a ton of comments. So I'm going to read one of them to you. I'm not going to call anyone's name out, but if you're on and if you recognize this, feel free to raise your hand. So on the point of democratizing mature usage within a product dev org. It's one thing to have programmers using AI for development. It's another thing to have a full product dev team collaboratively building with AI,
Yeah,
which I think is a really, so this is not just like engineers, right? This is expanding
right.
it. In fact, this isn't even that comment to me. This is even just focused on within just the product development team itself, right? Which I think is kind of an interesting challenge. I've seen I've seen
Yeah.
challenges like outside of product dev, but this is calling it out even within the product development team.
Yeah, I think I've seen that as well. It's a tough challenge because it's not actually that we're just doing everything faster. That there's some value to get from that, but the real value comes from changing the way that we're doing things, right? Similar to the same way that like um, your backup solution for your home is back things up once a day and everything's fine. And if a hard drive dies, you order a new one and plug it in. But if you're running a data center, hard drives are dying every minute or whatever, depending on how big your data center is. So you actually have to change, you have to fundamentally change the way that you are doing things because at scale and at speed, the challenge, the problems change. And I think that's true for product teams working with AI also. The old model of let me write a PRD and throw it over the fence and see what we get back. I mean, throwing it over the fence never really worked, but the idea of like I'm gonna design something with words, and then I'm gonna have designers design it with images, and then I'm gonna have engineers build it with code. That can collapse when you're working with AI, right? You can have PMs building with code. You don't even have to, know the languages you're working in anymore with rapid prototyping. And then the prototype is not the final product, but it is if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a clickable prototype must be worth a million. Um, and beyond that, the speed with which engineers can build and change features has moved to a point where it's almost real time, right? So instead of saying, hey, this is a feature, here's the critique, go away for a day and come back and give me an update, it's let's sit down and work on this in real time. We can actually tweak things and see the results immediately, more like a film director working with an editor in the edit suite. Right, you
Hmm.
can make the change and look at it and see like, yeah, is that what we actually wanted?
You
And
saying
that
to
is
adopt
a
AI,
way of
we have to think
working
like
that.
Hollywood? Is that what you're saying? No, I'm
What's
just kidding.
that?
Are you
Yeah.
saying to adopt AI, we got to think like Hollywood?
Hollywood is actually doing some pretty amazing things with AI. I read somewhere recently that the cost of CGI in movies is dropping dramatically
Yeah.
because of generative AI, because it doesn't all have to be created by hand, which I find really encouraging because it means a lot more niche sci-fi and fantasy things might get film adaptations because the cost is coming down. But
Yeah.
that's a
Well,
total
yeah.
aside.
Why is CGI getting worse then? But anyways, that's a whole other thing. Okay, so let's I want to dive into some we've kind of framed up the problem. I want to dive into some more interesting aspects and some of the why parts, right, of this. And
Yeah,
then we'll then gravitate towards solutions or maybe potential solutions. So we're talking about all these gaps and bottlenecks, right?
yeah,
So if you look inside organizations that say they're, quote, doing AI, but they're not seeing results. So why does this gap exist? What's creating this bottleneck? You mentioned learning. Skipping the
yeah.
learning part, is it just that we need time to learn? Is it something else?
Well, I think it's not a binary like we have AI or we don't, right? It's a transformation similar to digital transformations. I think we were talking earlier about the in the age of the rise of the internet. A lot of companies said, "Hey, we need a website," and they put up a website, and nothing changed. And they were like, "Well, that was a failure." But the companies that actually succeeded are the ones that looked at it as this is a years, if not decades long transformation from the way that we used to do business to the way that we're doing business now. And I think the if you look at sort of the history of technology, I'm a fan of looking at this sort of the first. We had to move bits faster, right? We needed faster processors, and we had Moore's law, and so we had the ability to move bits faster, and that opened up a whole set of possibilities, right? A whole set of new things we could do. We could create graphical user interfaces. We could create all kinds of things. Then we started to move into, okay, the bits are moving pretty fast now. We've got the internet, we've got broadband, we've got fast processors. Now we have the atoms problem, right? How do we, everything slows down when bits hit atoms, right? How do you, the logistics of moving things from place to place, the shipping, when things impact the real world. And I would venture to say that the atoms problem is largely solved. And maybe it doesn't feel that way when we've got a snowstorm like this and it delays your Amazon shipment. But like for the most part, logistics has been digitized. We have ways to get things around the world. It's, the world is a lot smaller than it was 20 years ago. Um, and now we're hitting the neurons problem, right? We can move atoms around pretty quickly. We can put them on planes. We can track where they are, but we can't change the speed at which humans learn and adapt. And that's where the neuron problem comes in, is we've got, human neural pathways take somewhere between several weeks and a year to rewire, to
Mm.
learn habits, to if we're trying to get from a mode where I'm used to writing every email by hand and I want to get to a mode where my habit is let me have AI draft my email, and then if it's good enough I just send it. Like that takes time to learn, not just how to do it, but how to remember to actually use the tool. Um, and
So is it as
the
simple as like learning a new exercise routine? Hey, I want to build
Yeah,
the muscle or I want to lose 10 pounds. And so it's just getting on that treadmill every day or just
It
lifting the
takes some
weights every
practice
day.
to
And
just get your muscles used to doing the thing, right? And so it's the same as with neurons, right? To build those pathways in the brain that make it automatic takes time for those neurons to rewire and fire in a sequence that leads to the habit that you want to have. Um,
so is it just
and
encouraging the organization to create space for people to be able to rewire their neurons? Get
there's
into
a
the
little bit of
mental
that.
work.
Yep.
Yeah.
You got to get hands on. I think the challenge is that the way that most organizations handle this or have handled this previously is spin up a learning and development program. It's going to take 6 months to develop. It's going to take 6 months to roll out. You're looking at a couple of years from start to finish to get this thing up and running. Certainly, when we did the product college at Capital One, like it took a long time to get it stood up and to design all the curriculum and to get that moving. But product management principles, the fundamental principles anyway, don't change as fast as AI is changing. And so the
Yeah.
problem with a long-term training program is that by the time you've released it, it's obsolete.
Well, then there's an element also of making it relevant to the individual. Not
Yeah.
everyone, obviously, in the organization is working in product or in development.
Yep.
How is this relevant to me? I could go through the training, maybe because I go through it because maybe I'm genuinely excited about it and interested, or maybe because, my boss has told me, hey, this is the thing you got to do. So, and there's people like that. They're forced, basically, thou shalt go into this training. So they're already have this mindset of like, what? And then they go through it. And I've been through some of these corporate trainings before at some of the organizations you and I are very familiar with, all good
Yeah.
intention.
Yeah.
But you go through, and I found myself even, this isn't just with AI, just in general, right? About these learning things. And you're sitting there, you're like, so I get this content, I get the topic. I'm sitting here trying to figure out, so why is this relevant to me? How does this change what I do on a day? I'm not connecting those dots, or those dots haven't been
Yeah.
connected for me. How does this
Yeah.
change my daily workflow and what I'm
Yeah.
accountable?
There's got to be time for experimentation, right? I'm on the advisory board for University of San Francisco's strategic AI program, and the advice that I have given over and over again is there needs to be more hands-on, right? People need to actually use the tools, not just read about them. Partly because that's actually a really good way to learn in general, but also because it gives you the ability to say, all right, I saw an example of this. Let me try it with my data, with my content, with my problems, and see whether how it works in my particular context. It's also really important because the capabilities continue to evolve. So by the time you watch that video about how people did this, a month ago, it's probably obsolete and things the tools the AI tools are evolving so quickly that unless you're using them hands on, your understanding of them is always going to be behind the curve. And that's, it is better to have some understanding than none, but it's certainly, if you're not keeping up with what they can do today, you may have an understanding of it that is unnecessarily limited. And I think even just looking at um, using the same challenge, the same example, and trying it with AI over a period of time gives you a better intuitive understanding of the way that that things are developing, how the jagged frontier is evolving, and how quickly it's moving, and where AI can get to
Yeah.
today. I think my favorite example of this is Ethan Mollick's create a picture of an otter on a plane using Wi-Fi, which he has been
Okay.
doing for now like 2 or 3 years, and you can look at the progression of the quality of the images and the ability to hold the prompt in mind for the mind, not
Yeah.
exactly, but for the LLMs, and just see how quickly things are evolving. It's really that intuitive understanding is really important for PMs who are going to try to build things that are backed by LLMs.
Yeah. John, you got a question? Feel free to come off mute and ask your question briefly.
Hello from Brooklyn, Shardul and Teague.
Hey.
I wanted to go back to something that you said a while ago, Teague, about having to have a plan for rolling out AI within an organization. I'm curious if you can talk about if you have had a plan in an organization, what that looks like. What have you seen as successes? I'm certainly familiar with, as you described, Shardul, the like, a mass training. What does this mean for me? And it not really resonating. What is a successful plan in your experience?
Yeah, so I think a successful plan has several stages. The first stage is access, right? People have to be able to access the tools. You can't be hands-on with the tools if you don't have access to them. And that is sometimes non-trivial, right? There's a lot of security concerns. There's a lot of procurement concerns around getting access to tools. So the first thing to do is get people access to the tools. And ideally, frontier models, right? You want people to be using the stuff that is cutting edge, and ideally everybody in the company, right? Not gating it, but understandably, a lot of companies will start with a smaller pilot. The second stage is you need to have the right data, right? The thing that has not changed about generative AI from traditional AI is that foundationally you need good data, because if you have garbage in, you get garbage out, right? So you have to have the context to share with the LLM to get useful results out of it. And that means being able to access and put into the context the data that your company is using, whether that's, connecting it to production databases that have, customer analytics in them, or whether that's just adding your Jira tickets and your Confluence pages into the context of the AI tool. And then the third piece, I think, is where a lot of companies fall down, is you have to meet people where they are. And it's not going to be a monolith, right? People across the organization are going to be at different places with AI. And you have to meet each of those groups where they are, which can't be done with a one size fits all training, right? You have to actually, like, the the hands-on learning is useful, but it's dramatically accelerated by having somebody to ask questions of and to give you pointers and tips and watch you use it. I think this has been true of software for a long time. If you want to learn a new piece of software, the fastest way to do it is to sit down with somebody who knows it and have them watch you use it, and you watch them use it, and you learn from each other, and it dramatically accelerates the learning process compared to, watching a video or reading a book. AI is the same way, right? If you want to enable your engineers to use AI to generate code, you should have them generate code with people who know how to do that coming in. And a lot of the organizations that are selling into the enterprise have sort of the equivalent of forward deployed engineers who will come and train your team on how to get the most out of the tools. Cursor is a great example. Claude's another good example. That training specifically for that use case is useful and is different from the training that you want to give to your back office staff who is using it to analyze data in spreadsheets and create internal communications. But if you try to send everybody to the same training, you get a lot of people who are confused, right? And if you only train part of your organization, you get the problem that Shardul was talking about earlier, where you have some people understand it and a lot of people get left behind.
So there's training. You're talking about training. We've talked a lot about that. You were saying earlier about get hands on,
Yeah,
right? There's an element of
training should include a lot of
you
hands-on.
didn't say this,
Yeah.
I'm saying this, but there's an element because I hear it from people. It's hard to keep up. And
Yes,
especially, I mean, we've always
I
this
feel
has
that.
always been a challenge with technological change, keeping up, but I think it,
Yeah.
it does feel especially so now with AI because of the change of pace. So you're in an organization, you're trying to do your day job, you're even on board with like, hey, I get it, AI, got to get on, I'm willing to go to the training, willing to get my hands on, but how do you then advise people? I'm sure you've heard this. How do I keep up? Because every day it feels like there's something new. How do I keep up? Versus I do have my day job to do, and I'm still
Yeah.
accountable for delivering on the things I need to deliver on.
Yeah.
How do you talk to people about balancing that reality in their own individual work lives?
I think it's really common. Everybody I've talked to, even the people who are experts, are saying, I can't keep up, right? There's just so much to learn about. And I think part of that is a framing problem, right? We're thinking about AI as if it's a specific discipline, but that's almost like thinking about technology as if it's one discipline, right? Like, if you can imagine back in the internet era that there might have been one person at a small company who's like, I'm the technology person, right? I do all the technology stuff. I am the single point of, I keep the computers running. I manage the
Yeah.
website. All the things
It's an IT problem.
flow
Everything
through.
was just an IT problem back then.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything is, yeah, and it, like, if you're a small company, there's one person who's responsible for all of that. Now, of course, today we would think it's insane that you would have one person responsible for all the technology at a company, right?
Yeah.
It's too large a discipline. It touches everything. And I think the thing with AI is that we've already reached that point. It's just proliferating so much faster. It doesn't actually make sense to have one person be the AI person for your company, because it's too broad. There's too many different places it can be applied. And the only way that I've been able to keep up with it, aside from, playing with it nights and weekends, is to sort of scope down what are the AI tools that I'm actually going to invest my time in learning and doing well, right? And so
Right.
I do
You can't
a
learn
lot
all of
more
it at
with,
once.
you can't do all of it. You
You
can't.
have to
Yeah.
somehow get focused. Maybe that's where the organization, maybe through the training or the learning programs or whatever, could at least provide some guidance to the
Yeah.
individual employees. Say, look, I know there's a billion of them. Let's, for
These are the ones
now,
we're using. Yeah.
for reasons that hopefully make
Yeah.
rational sense, we're gonna, for your role, maybe like let's limit it down to these for now. And then from there, if you want to expand, awesome. More power to you. But
Yeah.
just to give some focus and some help.
Yeah, I think it's important to start subdividing, right? I spend a lot more time with text generation and code generation than I do with image and video generation, right? But there are
Right.
other folks at our organization who spend a ton of time with image and video generation and are way deep into that more than I could get on a nights and weekends basis.
Yeah, I would
Um,
imagine that if you're in UI, UX, graphics department, marketing even, you need to
yep.
it would make sense that they're spending more time on the image and graphics generators than
Yeah.
maybe some of the other ones. So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, wait a
Sheldon
month.
has got a great question in the chat. Sheldon, actually, it's rather than me reading it, do you want to just come on, tell us your question briefly rather than because it's two paragraphs. So
Yeah, so speaking of obsolete, as you said, now AI tools and all departments have to manage AI. But would it lead to a knowledge gap?
yeah, he's talking about this cognitive
Yeah.
gap, right? As he put in the
Yeah,
chat.
there's two places where I think that comes up. One is if I have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And I think that's we see a lot of organizations say, all right, we're using Gen AI for everything. Let's try to shoehorn it in, even when it's not the right solution to solve the customer's problem. And then I think the other thing we hear about is the skill atrophy of if I'm using LLMs for these things, am I losing my own skills to if I'm using LLMs to do all my code review, do I lose my own skills at doing code reviews, right? Because I'm not using them regularly. Um, the first of those problems, the hammer looks like a nail, I think is the what I see as the more dangerous one, right? I think it's from a product management perspective, we should be focused on what the problem is and how to solve it, not how do I use AI to do things, right? I mean, everything I've seen that's been led from let's start with AI and see what we can do with it has not succeeded at generating significant value. The other piece of it, the skill atrophy, I think is an interesting one because I think there's still value in having fundamental understanding of how these things work because we are effectively managing them now, right? We're managing AI agents to do these tasks, but it's sort of like numeracy versus the ability to do rapid calculations, right? I have an understanding of numbers and of math, but I try not to do math in my head when I can help it, right? I have a calculator with me all the time. I use a lot of spreadsheets, and certainly my mental calculation skills have atrophied because I have ubiquitous access to calculators, but I don't necessarily think that is a loss. I think the real loss comes from never learning the skills in the first place, and I think that's where there's some concern that if if junior engineers never learn to write code, then they're going to be managing LLMs that are writing code without understanding what writing code actually is. And that's something to think about. I don't have an easy answer on that one yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think there are any easy answers on any of this because it's evolving.
That's fair.
One aspect we've not yet talked about, Teague, and it was a comment that we got, KPIs and impact measurement. And I'm going to expand on that. I don't mean just there's certainly an element of, hey, we built this AI feature, this AI thing for customers. What are the KPIs or success metrics? Is it making
Yeah,
any difference or impact? Is it a net benefit to customers? There's definitely that aspect. But there's also the internal aspect for basically, was it worth it internally? Whether in terms of
yeah,
our time spent adopting these tools or it being used throughout the rest of the organization, even for internal work, as we've been talking about. So what about that aspect? Because, and I bring it up not just because, obviously, metrics and success and all is
yeah,
certainly a typical part of product management. But as we know, it does impact human behavior. We are going to act and
yeah.
behave based on the incentives that have been laid out before us, right? Can we talk a little bit about that aspect of it?
Yeah, totally. So there's a couple of of angles on this one. I think first is the human behavior piece I want to tackle because I love human behavior.
I know
Uh,
you.
one of the things that I have seen in organizations that do not adopt well is that people continue to be rewarded for the things they've always been rewarded for, and they will have their secret AI assistant help them be super effective and look super effective compared to their peers, and they will be rewarded for such. Right? The problem with that is that they're keeping their gains secret and using it as a competitive advantage against their peers in the organization. And if you want to break out of that and actually level up a whole organization, you have to start rewarding people for teaching. You have to reward them for sharing their secret tricks that make everybody more effective instead of holding on to them and looking like the superhero. And the flip side of that is if you have an organization where it is very risk averse, you may run into places where people are doing things that they're not sure they're allowed to, but it's really effective and they're not sharing it because they're afraid of getting slapped on the wrist. And so
Mhm.
what you want to strive for is a place where people know what's allowed and they are rewarded for sharing their success. And so the rising tide floats all boats. Um, of course, the solution to this has nothing to do with AI. It has everything to do with culture.
Yeah,
And that is, the case of most organizational transformations is if you don't have the right culture, you have to start there, right? You have to
yeah,
start with changing the incentives so that you can get the behavior that drives the transformation. You can't just mandate the
yeah,
transformation with whatever culture you've got.
yeah. So, I think what we're I think really tapping into here is about leaders creating the right, a safe culture for
Psychological safety.
experimentation,
Yeah.
for psychological safety, right? And as part of that, building in some kind of incentive or some way of rewarding that behavior. I don't know if I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe you have an opinion on it. Is it in the performance evals? Is it tied to your bonus or some other means by which you can incentivize that behavior? There's I saw this LinkedIn post. I'm not going to name the name from the CEO. I don't think it was CEO of an enterprise, probably a startup or a growth company or something like that. But this somehow got out in the public domain. He sent this memo to all the employees saying that from now on, your performance evaluation will be based on your usage of AI. So we are going to track exactly how much AI you're using, when you're using it, and come performance review time, we're going to look at that metric and put you on the classic bell curve, and you're going to get evaluated, and that's going to impact obviously your pay, your merit increase, your bonus, all of that. It honestly, frankly, it felt a bit extreme to me. Maybe
Yeah. I mean,
I'm gonna give the benefit that maybe it's coming from a good place about, hey, I need to, if we're building and selling AI, we got to know AI.
yeah.
But it felt like I don't know. I didn't feel like that's the right leadership level.
Yeah. Performance management is game design. And if you badly design the game, then people will find the exploits, right?
Right.
Um,
Well
and
said.
I think that kind of game design where it's purely based on usage and you're going to be actually rewarded or penalized for it, people will use AI to maximize usage, not to actually create value. And so you really want to keep the performance management based on creating value. I get the sort of underlying idea of using AI leads to competence with AI, which we believe leads to value, right? But if you measure the usage and not the value, you're missing the key point. And I think that's you can incentivize usage, you can do that, but don't stop there, right? You still want to measure that people are actually creating value. And by the way, we actually only care about the value. If they're not using AI and they're still managing to create tremendous amounts of value, they should be rewarded. And I think
Mhm.
that's the key is that we have a hypothesis that more AI usage leads to competence, leads to value, makes people more effective, makes them more productive, whatever. But it's still a hypothesis, right? And we should be testing that. We should be measuring the usage and we should be continuing to reward value. And we should look and see whether usage correlates with value.
Teague, have you seen what these kinds of reward systems could look like? Whether well, actually, I'll ask it in two ways.
Yeah.
Either specifically for AI or maybe in adopting other technologies or practices that potentially could be used as a template for this.
Yeah. So a lot of companies are trying different things. I think the ham-fisted attempt is mandates, right? Saying everybody has to do this. I think The nuanced approach, which is obviously much more work, but also more effective, is to focus on enablement. It's track the usage and then go ask people what's keeping them from using it, right? Is it that they're not getting value out of it? Is it there's some blocker for it? Is it that they're using a different tool that they find works better? But if you don't actually go talk to your customers, who in this case are the employees of the company, you're not going to know how to build the right thing for them. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget. I mean, this is the thing that it's always product management has always been focused on. You have to understand your customers. And just because your customers are inside the building doesn't mean you can stop talking to them, right? You
Yeah.
have to actually listen to what people are saying. And if you're focused on enforcing mandates, you're not actually listening to people. You're just telling them what to do and not closing the feedback loop.
Yeah. So let me bring this back to product management. So as we talked about at the start, at the end of the day, this often ends up landing on product teams, right? But of course, PMs don't control these reward systems. They don't control these incentives. I'll even blow it up into say if there needs to be something related to the org design or the org approach or infrastructure, don't control that either. But at the same time, as a product leader, as a product team, as a product manager, you're told, get AI done. So how can you lead, or how have you seen, or what have you tried, such that you can lead AI enablement without that formal authority?
Well, of course, influence without authority is a core skill for product management, right?
Right.
And we're often dependent on lots of parts of the organization that don't report directly to us, and so a lot of it is again listening to what people need and helping them get it. But I think that's the key piece here is that AI enablement is not necessarily about building cool AI features. It is about building systems that accelerate human adaptation so that organizations can keep pace, and that is something that product managers are actually quite good at, right? There's an opportunity here for product leaders to understand both the technical possibilities and the business realities, to know how to build systems that change behavior, right? We do that for customers all the time. We can do it for folks inside the organization. But thinking about how to apply these skills to organizational capability is maybe a newer frame for some product leaders. And I think that's, the challenge here is we are facing biological constraints, right? The neurons that we need to rewire. We are building systems inside an organization. We are competing with the speed of technology evolving, but it's all enablement work, and that's what product work is. I think
Yeah.
the thing to do for the place to start is to pick one system and start bringing it in. You know, measure usage if you think that usage leads to capability, leads to value, but don't overhaul all of your incentive systems in a reactionary way, because the incentive systems are fairly complex. And obviously, with the Chesterton's fence, right? Don't take down the fence until you know why it's there, right? Don't try to redesign the entire thing to over rotate on AI. The purpose of the business is not to use AI. The purpose of the business is to solve customer problems. At the end of the day, that's the thing that actually matters. And if you're not solving customers' problems, it doesn't matter how much you're using AI. So don't
Yeah.
lose sight of the actual fundamental goal as we're looking at this new and powerful tool.
Here's an interesting question that I got from an audience member. What's one belief about AI adoption you wish leaders would stop repeating?
Hmm. I mean, I think there's build it and they will come, right? Is
Yeah.
the biggest lie anybody ever told a product manager, if anybody ever told an entrepreneur. I think it's true for this as well, right? You can't just buy the tools and expect people to like suddenly pick up and use them. You have to actually work through the nuance of enabling people to get their work done with the tools and make space for learning and all those things.
Yeah. So, in other words, it doesn't help to flame post on LinkedIn saying, if you're not adopting AI, you're that just really doesn't
It
help
doesn't, yeah,
anyone. Or just telling people, hey, you should just do it. Like,
right. If you're not asking them why they're not doing it, you can't actually solve their problem.
yeah. Yeah. So T, given everything we've been talking about, you're a product manager, you're a product leader in your organization trying to get this done. What would you say are one or two or three key takeaways that they could try and implement on today's Thursday? So Monday, right? Monday they could come in
Sure.
and say,
Yeah.
let me try and give this a shot, right? What could they do, you think?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of pieces here. One is For your own knowledge and comfort with the tools, if you are not already, sign up for one tool, put the link in your bookmark bar, and start trying to use that as your default so that you get hands on with the tool and get comfortable with using it regularly, right? I know I was talking with another person the other day who said one of the things they did is replace their standard Google search in the search box with Perplexity, just because it helps switch that mode, start building the habits. The second thing is if you have AI tools for your organization and people are not using them, do a listening tour, right? Talk to your customers, listen to your customers, more importantly, about why they aren't using it, what they're using it for, what it's not working for, what they still need. Because if you don't understand the limitations that they're running into, there's no way you can solve them. And that's classic product management.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing is if you are a people manager, or if you have influence over people management, I would encourage having there's nothing quite so strong as having your manager encourage you to take time to learn the tools. And so encourage your team to take time to learn the tools, even if it's not productive time, if you think it's going to be valuable, right? I think this stuff is incredibly valuable. I think the upside is there, even if it's sometimes hard to measure. And so taking a day to go, work on a side project that is all AI enabled will pay dividends, right? And one of the things that organizations can do is support the experimentation that your people are doing even outside of work, right? So if you have professional development funds, let people use those on AI tools, pay for their tokens so that they can go learn this stuff on things that they're excited about, and they'll bring that knowledge back to the organization.
Yeah. I love the example of the perplexity, replacing perplexity in
Yeah.
the search bar. So it could even start with just small habits. It's
Yeah.
like you need a new diet, you need a new workout routine. Well, doing a wholesale change is super hard. Or they do this when you're learning how to train for a half marathon or a marathon. Don't start trying to run 26 miles. That's
Yeah.
insane, right? Like when I started years ago, it was like, can you run to the end of the block and back? Right? Like
Yeah.
just do that and then start building up to a mile, and then from a mile you build up to 2 miles and so on and so forth. That's great.
You
So
start using it for small things and then you start using it for big things.
yeah, I think Sheldon did have another question. Would you like to comment on the value of the ongoing trend of testing PMs being proficient in various AI tools for a variety of PM tasks for job interviews?
Yeah, I think it's short-sighted. I think anytime we're testing people on tool usage instead of on like the fundamental skills of the role, we're assuming that we know the right way to do something instead of valuing the output. And I think that's just a management failure in general. I think that we should be testing people on how they manage products, how they think through how they use their judgment to think through the human and technology and business aspects of product management, and whether they do that with AI or not doesn't matter as much as whether they do it well or not. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say to people, you should feel free to use AI during the job interview. And I expect that people who are using it will probably perform better than people who are not. But, the difference between inputs, outputs, and outcomes is important, right? We always want to manage to outcomes, not inputs. And I think testing people on their proficiency with AI tools is measuring on inputs.
I'm going to share one thing with you guys, give you a forward look into what's coming up, and then we'll get to your questions. So we have a bunch of great episodes, as you can see, all the way through April. Next week, we got Rena Alexson coming in she's the CEO of Product Side. We talk about how PMs can gain decision rights. We've got Matt LeMay, author of Impact First Product Teams. That's going to be really interesting. We are going to take your feature ideas and live estimate them in front of you. So if you register, the registration form will go out next week. You can then also, there's a Google form, you can submit your feature idea, and you'll either get to learn from us or laugh at us, probably more the latter, but we'll see how it goes. Jen Simpson is going to be here talking about improving the PM engineering relationship. Rahul Abhyankar to talk about go to market, a very important skill for product managers. Matt Moore to talk about influencing without authority, very, very big, broad topic. Greg will be talking about product management for tech-enabled services and digital product management. Todd will be here to talk about managing up to executives. Saeed will be here to talk about the disconnect between PMs and product leaders, and Grant Elliott will be here to talk about how product management lost its voice and how to reclaim it. He just did a presentation on it at the Product Led Summit in DC yesterday. It was really really interesting. And actually we've got some more. I think we're all booked up almost through May at this point. I've got a few other folks, potential guests
What a
on.
great lineup.
Yeah, that's a really, really great lineup. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks everyone for joining. Teague, thanks so much. This was
My
great. Really
pleasure.
great conversation. Everyone, you'll get the replay, if not later today, tomorrow. Other than that, thanks so much, Teague. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.